people having the same experiences, which, I think is fine if that's what you want. But ultimately, like, it's so much more of an individual experience. Like, it's all about, like, what you make of it and how you experience it. And so, when you see people who are doing all the same things, like, you can really make a trip your own, and you don't have to do what, these people are going and doing. Like, there's absolutely no pressure on you to do any of that. Uh, like, you can just basically go and say, okay, this is what I want to get out of a trip, and this is what I'm going to do. And I think the sooner you realize that, the more kind of liberating it is. I have a friend who I met in Poland, funnily enough. So he was in the bunk above me, and basically we hit it off. He was a British guy, and he ended up saying to himself, he's like, oh, I'm going to come out and visit you in Australia. I'm going to stay for 6 months. And it's been like 12 years and he hasn't left. So he's like stayed out here. So like, absolutely great dude, love him to bits. But he said something that I really liked when he was essentially saying that, he knows who he is. Like, he knows he's like, I know who I am. I know that I like nice things. I like, going out and eating good food. I know where I want to go based on those things. And I'm not going to feel guilty about not seeing other things because, I know what I like, and I know I'm not going to like that. Like, if I go to Paris and I don't see the Eiffel Tower, I don't give a shit because I don't care. I don't care about a big building. All I care about is going to this tiny little bar and having myself a beer and eating really good food. And that's what he cares about. And he's just like so confident about who he is. And it's made his travels all the better. And, like, some people might say, dude, you keep going to the same places, like, try something different. He's like, no, I'm happy. Like, what of it?
Yeah, no, exactly that. I mean, I almost get the analogy of, let's say you're at a really nice sort of winery or restaurant with really nice sort of menu selection of wines, and your best mate who you're with is a big wine guy, and they can tell you where it's from, they can tell you all the different tastes and all the different things, and then you taste it and he says to try this one, but then you'll get this, and you just have a little sip and go, yeah, it's a red. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's
exactly.
like
It's
you
like,
can enjoy it, and they might be a little bit frustrated because of all the undertones you're missing and all the aroma and the feeling behind it. But I mean, that's
lemon,
just
cherry.
yeah. But it's the people it is. I mean, I feel like me and yourself, from what I've read from your work and where you've been and how you like to travel, are kind of birds of a feather in that way, where it's that whole mystique around getting lost and like, finding your way, and who you meet along the way is the whole point of doing it. Well,
Yeah,
for
I
some
think
people,
so.
it's not there.
Yeah, I think some of the best travel experiences that I've had, at least, have been ones where, I've gone to places that are very strange. And so, like, I spent a month in a fishing village in Japan, in a place that no one's ever heard of. There wasn't even a convenience store or a grocery or even a restaurant. It was just a couple of vending machines. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. But you're not really going to get many people who are going to go there and just spend a month there. And when people ask why, it's like, why not? Like, isn't this going to be awesome? Like, it's just such a really unique experience. And it ended up being incredible. And,
Is this one of
there's
those where you
so
can't tell
many.
me where it is because of the sort of
No,
traveler's code,
I can
or
tell you where it is. I can absolutely tell you where it is. It's a place called Nigashima. So it's a little town called Nigashima, and it is in Wakayama. Well, it's in Mie Prefecture, but there's this weird little prefecture where it's kind of half Mie and half Wakayama, and so it's sort of like on the border between the two. But it's basically like this tiny little fishing village that had this amazing Airbnb, and we stayed there for a month, me and my wife. And the train to get there came maybe every hour and a half, and to go do our grocery shopping, we'd have to go get on this train and go like 4 stops over. There was a beach that was in the train station next to it, so like 1 stop away, there was this amazing beach. And you don't really think of Japan and beaches, but as an Australian, like a guy who's grown up on the beaches, this
beautiful
beach was
beaches of that as well.
absolutely, yeah, yeah, exactly. This beach was incredible though, and there was like it had a vending machine that sold beer, and so with the beer vending machines in Japan, you need to have a license to sell it, right? So it's like you need to scan your ID so they know that you're a certain age. And some absolute hero had stuck his ID onto the machine, and so anyone could go up and buy it. And so it was like like an absolute legend had just been like, I'm going to leave my ID here so that anyone who wants to buy beer can buy beer. And so we
I
just
love
go to
that.
this vending machine, buy beer, and then just go sit on the beach. And it was perfect, right? But the amount of tourists they would have there would be so few.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I feel like it's you, as we were just saying before, how the places that are or were so incredible beforehand are now so overpopulated because of this kind of sense of travel media, travel social media, where they all kind of go to the same place. They all just trying to chase the views and the numbers and what's trending. And yes, they're amazing places and it can spoil them a little bit. But then there's always those places around. It's just the best part is that the ones, it almost seems how everyone says the world's getting smaller and these places are more accessible. But as the places which were kind of unknown and are now more accessible become more, well, were originally inaccessible and are now accessible to everybody, and all the hotels, all the hostels, everything is sort of centered around that as a travel destination to bring in the money. Those places are easy to go to, but there's still so many, well, there's more hidden gems than there are visible ones.
Yeah,
And
I think the cool thing about that is that when it's actually worked out in a weird way, kind of well. Well, it's like okay, it's both it's good and bad in the sense that those places, like I was recently in Kyoto, and there's like a bamboo forest there that everyone goes to see, and I thought, oh, okay, cool. It's like this would be an interesting thing to do. I'll go check it out. So we got on bikes and we cycled out there, and when we got there, there was honestly like 10,000 people. It was insane. There was like people spilling out into the streets, and I was like, I was shocked. And me and my wife were just like, no, we're not going to go see this. And so we just like, we'll treat it like a nice bike ride. And so we started cycling, and then we ended up on this bike path that goes all the way from Kyoto to Nara. And it was incredible. And it was like we just ended up on this path and we followed it. And we had the like most amazing day following this bike path. We ended up at this cafe, like a little cycling cafe, where we turned up and everyone was like, what are you people doing here? Like, why are you here? And
just
we had like an
getting the
amazing
stairs,
meal
just like, what's
there.
going on?
Yeah. Well, I mean, luckily I can speak a little bit of Japanese, and so it's like I can kind of sort of be like, "Hey, yeah, sorry, just tourists, don't speak much Japanese, but I'd love a beer if you have one." So
That's all you
yeah,
need to know. That's all.
yeah, exactly. I have this. It's like a weird. I'm not going to say superpower, but it's a very useful travel thing in the sense that I can speak, like if I hear a language, I'm pretty easy at replicating how it sounds. So, and I'm also very good at learning languages. And so like I can speak like a lot of different languages, but just like little bits, just like travel,
Mm.
uh, you know, like just the travel
Essentials,
elements
travel
of it.
essentials.
Just, yeah, travel
Hi,
essentials. But
how would you get to? Where's the nearest toilet? Where's the nearest train station? Can I have
yeah,
a beer?
yeah. Well, it's like, I think the five that I always say is you should learn how to say hello. You should learn how to say thank you. You should learn how to say delicious. I think delicious is probably one of the most important ones. You should learn how to say either cheers or amazing. It's always like a debatable on that one. So like cheers is good, and then but like saying something's amazing is like is awesome because like let's say it's like someone does something for you, and you can say, or you see something beautiful, and you're like, oh, like sugoi desu ne, which is like amazing in Japanese, right? Like it's like, or like sugyot is amazing in Thai. But like seeing something and you're like, oh my god, this is amazing. So that I always find that that's really good. And then also see you again. So like see
Ah,
you again. It sounds like a weird thing
has a different
to
connotation.
yeah, exactly, different connotation. But when you say see you again to somebody in their language, the excitement that it shows to them, even though you might not see them again, but the idea that you will, even though you're a tourist and you're just traveling through, it spurs on this like amazing amount of like joy. I don't know. Out of all the things that you can say, for me, it's like whenever I say that to somebody, like like it's funny that the my local coffee shop around the corner, the guy's Thai, and every time I see him, I'm like, oh, popcorn puni, which is see you tomorrow. And he's just every time he's just like, even though he's living here and he knows I'm going to see him tomorrow, just the joy on his face from it, it's
He's
amazing.
probably laughing because you're saying it completely wrong. He means something completely.
No, I've actually been told that my pronunciation's bang on. So it's one of my very few skills that I have. Other than that, I'm a very untalented person. But this is one thing that I
Well,
do nail.
I'd say otherwise, but I mean, even with that regard, I love sort of the hidden kind of cues in language where it's not so much about what you say, it's about what your intention is behind it. But
Yeah,
what you say, especially if it's in a different language, one, just attempting to speak another person's language is a compliment enough, where people love it. I had it in France. Unfortunately, in France, because my well French was so bad, I'd try and speak French to somebody, and then they just speak back to me in English because they'll say thank you. It's basically saying thank you. I appreciate the gesture, but we're just gonna get on easier if I do
Yeah,
speak in English instead. But obviously, that doesn't kind of work if you're in a completely different corner of the world where they're not likely to know English. But when you're
yeah.
trying, again, like you're saying, see you again and see you tomorrow and amazing, it's those little gestures are the ones that kind of bring you closer with the people of that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you'll have, I mean, like, thank you, hello, that kind of stuff. It's, that's good. But if you can just do that, like, one little bit more, and realistically, all you need to do is just memorize 5 words, like, and that's it. And when you think that you have spent all this money to go to a country, you're spending like thousands of dollars, you're taking all this time off work, you're doing all these things just to go to that place. The idea of memorizing 5 words, I mean, it's a very, very small like task to do. And it's just going to enhance that experience so much. Which is why I'm always like, whenever anyone's going to a place, I always try and convince them to be like, people appreciate it. Like people absolutely appreciate it. Just learn 5 words. And it's like it'll absolutely completely revolutionize the way you travel.
Yeah, that's 100%. I mean, I have a different kind of, I have an idea which I always try and use as much as I can when I'm in a different country or a new area, is where, again, reading from one of your articles, where exact same kind of, not issue, but kind of gripe that I had was when you're in an area and you just follow the same places that you see on your phone, or you find the best reviews or where people have said are amazing or whatever it might be. I try my best to actually speak to people and ask them, speak to locals and ask for their recommendations, because the likelihood is you're going to find somewhere so much nicer and you're going to find where they want to go and eat or where they want to go and drink. Even if it's
Yeah.
in your own language, or you have to nowadays use Google Translate or whatever it is you have, it's going to do it automatically with AI or whatever it is. Asking where they find it's the best place to go, where they'd recommend for you to go, and then even asking if they want to join you and you'll buy them a beer or whatever it might be. It kind of it brings that again, it puts you in the middle of that area and helps you kind of picture as if you were one of them.
Yeah. I think that's also as well, like that's a lot of what travel is about, right? Like it's like
Was what it used to
when you're
be.
going to, yeah, it was what it used to be, right? It used to not be, well, I mean, again, it goes back to that discussion about the individual, right, versus the collective, I guess. But for a lot of people, for me specifically, I imagine for you as well, when you're going to another country, you're not really going there just to snap a photo or do whatever. You're going there to experience what it's like to live in that country, like, to be one of the people who are part of that country and to like kind of see a different way of life. Because I think the more people that you can meet and connect with, I mean, the more open your understanding of the world becomes, and I think the more of a gracious and appreciative person that you are, because like it's very hard to hate someone when you've lived next to them. It's very hard to judge someone when you've seen the way they live. It's very hard to like to kind of I don't want to say be racist, but like it's kind of hard to not have empathy for the rest of the world when you've seen so much of it. And
Oh,
I think that
even
if
on a
more,
even on a basic survival note, it's very hard to be, in a sense, rude to somebody if you know that even if it is for selfish reasons, you rely on them for your own
yeah,
well-being or directions or help or whatever it might be. You don't go up to somebody and be rude to ask them where to go or what to
no.
do or whatever. You've got to be a nice person if for them to even dignify a response.
Yeah, and so I think travel actually like it's a good thing that you mentioned in terms of survival because it really does teach you certain like life skills about like how to like interact as a conscious member of society, and I think that's fantastic that it does that. The absolute worst case scenario of traveling is that you eat some good food and you see a couple of places. But at best, it has such limitless possibilities in terms of how we perceive each other and how we perceive the world. I think that I just wish more people did it.
Yeah.
Like as much as I don't want to see everyone turning up to the places I love, like I would just love the fact if more people, and obviously this is coming from a very privileged position because not everyone has the money to do it. It's not like it's an expensive thing. You can't just be like, well, everybody just travel. It's going to be fantastic. It's like no, like something like 80% of the world hasn't even been on a plane. Like there is, it's the stats are kind of crazy like that. But ultimately, like, the more people who can, I think this is probably more a message for people who have the means but just don't do it. Like, try it. Why not? What's the worst that happens?
Sure.
Get
Well,
gastro.
I've heard some horror stories. One of our friends I used to live with, he was locked up in a Thai prison for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. How'd that happen?
So he was boarding a bus, one of the sleeper buses, and he was crossing over
Yeah.
from one country to another. And he put his bag in the undercarriage because everyone had to put the bag in the undercarriage, but he'd forgotten because he was out the night beforehand to put his passport. He will keep his passport on him.
Oh,
So when he
no.
got there, so when he got to the border, and after everybody's passports, it wasn't in his bag. And then because of being somewhat hungover, drunk, and all his friends were getting over, whatever it might be, he asked what to do to some locals, and some locals said just make a run for it because there's a gap over through the train tracks where you can make it through to the other country. He got caught whilst doing so, and he was thrown into a Thai prison. I think it was Thailand. It was one of the countries in Southeast Asia anyway. And he said
Yeah.
he was there literally in a holding cell, rampacked full of. He was the only white person there. He didn't have his ID, didn't have anything, didn't have any signal, nothing whatsoever. Everything taken off of him, and he had one phone call, and he literally didn't remember the number for the embassy or whatever it might be. So as he was trying to call and get connected through to anybody he could, he just basically blurted out his passport number because he remembered it and said his name and said his help, basically. And he was there for two
Yeah.
weeks, surviving off one boiled egg every day in a rampacked prison. And that he was telling me this story, and a lot of people that had put them off, but I literally had goosebumps. I was like, oh my God. Like, you feel alive. You feel alive whilst you're traveling because, yes, for the most part, everywhere's a lot more trusting than you give it credit. Everyone has those fears of where you go and think, oh, this could be dangerous, could be sketchy. I've heard all these horror stories, but it's very unlikely to happen, especially if you're not an arsehole, I'd say, or don't try and do anything stupid or piss off the wrong people.
Don't be a dickhead.
But it's that thrill again. It's that survival. It's you're on the edge of the seat. Like he was telling me this with a massive smile on his face. I was listening to it, gulping it up, like, oh my God, this is incredible. And he was that kind of thrill, that fear factor of being out, which is why I was saying how every step along my travel journey so far has led to just being eventually in the arse end of butt fuck nowhere.
Yeah.
It's like,
Amazing.
and
You're going to Thailand, yeah?
we will be, yeah.
Eventually.
Sorry?
I've got some places for you to go in Thailand. If you want to end up in the middle of nowhere where people are going to be like, "What are you doing here?" But it's going to be incredible. I have some places for you to go, my friend.
Do,
It's
do you know what? It sounds like I shouldn't be this way because of how I live and who I like to speak to in the podcast as well. But I don't, as much as I get recommendations, I will keep a note of them and I'll write them down if I'm stuck for anything. But I kind of just like to get lost. I love to go. I love to get lost. I love to, right, where are we? Who's going where? Let's tag along if we feel like it. If not, let's go somewhere else. If we get tired of somewhere, let's try it out. Let's, the best possible, to the best of our ability, let's just enjoy it for what it is. Because there's a lot of kind of getting out of your own head when you go traveling, I feel, where expectations can be a massive killer, and you can think things are going to be a certain way and they're not, and you can want them to be a certain way and then they aren't. And those expectations you put on it, just, it's better to go into it with
Yeah.
none.
Yeah.
And what, I can't remember the exact saying, but it was an equation of um oh, is it means the way you feel about somewhere is the expectations minus the reality.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I think as well with expectations, like people are always going to recommend stuff, but again, like, you know, we're all individuals. We all like different things. I absolutely love bike riding. So a lot of the places, like a lot of my
I can see the
favorite
bike behind you.
places. Oh yeah, oh yeah, there we go.
Sneaking into shot.
Yeah, there we are, there we are. So like a lot of my favorite places that I've been to are places that have great bike riding. Absolutely, like places that if you have good cycling, then it's going to be one of my favorite places to go because all I do is I'll just get on a bike and be like, cool, where can I go? It's the same principle as the van, right? With the van, you can just go wherever, and like I'm sure you're gonna have an absolutely amazing time driving up the coast of Australia. or the east coast of Australia, um, or the west coast of Australia, I should say. Sorry,
East.
I'm like, I lived in LA for a while.
East.
East, yeah.
Yeah, East. Yeah.
East,
Yeah.
east. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Never eat soggy wheat bix is the one. But the thing is, because I'm like, I'm a East Coaster in Australia, but I'm a West Coaster in LA. I'm sort of, I'm always screwing it up because I'm like, yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm like, oh yeah, West Coast, and they're like, no, we're in the East Coast, and then I'll say the same
It's an
thing like
amazing
East
skill
Coast
not
in
to
LA,
have
and
for
they're
a
like,
person who loves to drop themselves anywhere on the globe.
oh, I know it's terrible, isn't it? I also have, funnily enough, I have no sense of direction, zero sense of direction. So have you been to Riga in Latvia?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so basically Riga, really beautiful old town. There's like a little area where it's like essentially it's just like a couple of blocks where it's like gorgeous and old, and it's where all the hostels are. And anyway, I got there, and I've been staying in a hostel there for a week, and my brother had been in Russia, so he basically shacked up with this girl and ended up staying in St. Petersburg for a week longer while I went on to Latvia. And I'd been there for a week, so you would assume that after spending a week in a place it's like 4 blocks, right? Like 4 or 5 blocks, that's it. And you think after spending that much time there, I'd know my way around. So anyway, I walk up to the train station, I go and grab him, and then we spent the next hour and a half walking around these 4 blocks trying to find the hostel. And I was like, I swear to God, it's down this street. And in the end, my brother found it. So he was like, no, it's down this street. And I'm like, no, I don't think it is. And he's like, no, this is the only street in this whole city we haven't walked down. It's down this street. And we went down there and it was there. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no, I have no sense of direction.
You say it's terrible, but I always I try to look at things of like the yin and yang of each problem or issue, and I'm kind of thinking of it as if your sense of direction is so terrible, it's probably got more to do with the fact that you're so encapsulated by the things that are going on around you
Yeah,
than you are about where you are and your own safety.
mate, that's a very romantic notion of it. I think my wife would very much disagree. But thankfully, look, it's like she's like a homing beacon. Like you can, it's so funny. We went back to a neighborhood in Tokyo, and she was I was like, oh, I wonder if this little izakaya is still here. And she's like, oh, let's find out. I'm like, I was looking at my phone. I'm like, oh, I don't know what it's called. It's a Japanese name. I'm never going to be able to find it. She's like, no, it's around this corner. I know where it is. I'm like, we haven't been here in 8 years. And she's just like, no, it's just around here, and just walks straight there. And I'm like honestly gobsmacked. And so between the two of us, she's like so good at navigating around really complicated cities, and then I'm very good at speaking to people, like basically like using language to get by. And so between the two of us, we've actually worked out like a really good like traveling companionship. It's fantastic.
I'm the exact same with Katie, but kind of the opposite. Where so my sense of direction is, I feel like it's quite good. Like the first time I
Yeah,
go around somewhere, I'm a bit lost, but then I very quickly, I can always point to home, which is very useful knowing that home is anywhere in a van.
yeah, yeah,
And so
perfect.
I always know the direction. I don't exactly know the streets or which one we're on if we've been there before, but I know the direction quite well. But however, I'm absolutely god awful, and I kind of want to say selfishly that it's intentional at planning. I don't want to plan. I kind of just want to experience it, but I know where I'm going.
I
Katie
mean,
on
that's
the
great.
Katie on the other hand, she loves to plan. No fucking clue where she is at any moment. She's just there for the ride. So she said she'll tell me these places seem amazing. Let's go here. I've heard of this person. This is great. Let's go. I was like, awesome. I'll get us there. Make sure you know where we're going. Well,
Yeah,
where
and
the
then
end
the rest of the
destination
stuff,
is.
it will unfold in front of you. It's fantastic.
It
How
is.
how long have you guys been together?
So we met in Greece. So we're about just over 18 months deep. Not
Oh,
too long, but then
fantastic.
the whole time we've been together, because in the UK we live nowhere near each other. The whole time we've
Yeah.
known each other, we've basically been living together in very tight, confined areas.
It's honestly like the traveling with someone will absolutely, it's like being in a relationship, but on crack. Because there's nowhere to hide. There's no like, oh, I need a break. I need to do this. It's just like you are just
Can't.
there, and you're doing it, and you have to, and that's it. You got no alternative. And so like, you know, things that I think would usually take years in a relationship, you end up discovering about in 6 months. 6 months,
100%.
and so it just ends up becoming like, I'm pretty confident that if you can travel with someone, then you'll definitely be able to get through anything.
Well, that's exactly what we thought, where everybody was questioning our decision of we met in Greece, fell for each other straight away. I ended up going home before she did, and I came back out so I could ask her out. I didn't want to do it before I left, so I did it as I came back a few weeks or about 2 months later. And then whilst I was there, I'd organised to do the winter season, and then I'd asked her if she wanted to do it with me. And bear in mind, the whole month after that of us being together, we were away from each other for a month, 2 months, until the winter season started. And then we kind of had to say to each other, right, no hard feelings if this doesn't work, because truthfully, we don't know each other too well yet, because we've only just got together, and we're about to go share accommodation at the top of a snowy mountain, working long hours, and we'll figure it out. If it doesn't work, that's shake your hand, see you later, wish you the best. If it does, we're on to a winner.
That's such a fantastic attitude to go into it though with, right? Like it's like being able to go into it with that sort of mindset of just like, if this works, great. If not, we gave it a go. No dramas. It's like it's no expectations. You're just going to go in and hope for the best. And,
I mean,
and you know what? You're now in Australia, so that is pretty bloody fantastic.
I say it in hindsight. In hindsight, I can say it very, very easily. There's a lot of emotion that goes into that, the day-to-day
Yeah.
workings out. I'm not saying it was a breeze, and Katie wouldn't either, but anyone who can put up with me in such closely knit conditions, I thought after that I'd have to test her even more and then chuck her in a van with me around the other side of the world. But she's holding up well. It's okay. But
That's fantastic.
you say traveling, obviously, I believe as well, it can make or break a relationship. And once you travel with someone, it's like if ordinarily people would say before you propose or buy a house together, go rent somewhere together, try look after a dog before you want a kid, so on and so forth, and then see how.
Plant first, and then go to the dog.
Yeah.
Keep the plant. If you keep the plant alive for a few months, then the dog. That's the next logic.
Exactly. Cactuses don't count.
No,
It's not quite enough of a. but then traveling. It's a weird one. I feel anyway, because you've also got to find somebody. By nature, they have similar intentions and desires as you do, but they've also kind of got to be at the perfect stage in their life as you do as well. Because I know a few, or more than a few people who've met whilst traveling or on season, and then they couldn't do it because one of them wanted to go to university or one of them wanted to stay out and start their career, and they're they're really good for each other, just at different stages, which is unfortunate.
It's unfortunate, but that's life, man. It's like timing is everything. It's like one of the big things they talk about with like even in business or in like success, so much of it is timing. Like people, like let's say Bill Gates had kids, at the time when he started, you know what I mean? It's like let's say there was like certain factors that would have held him back from doing what he did. And you have to like this is just the way that life goes sometimes. Sometimes the timing's wrong. Like, there are people who get together too early. They get together too early that, and then they think, oh, what have I done? Have I got together too early? Am I missing out on stuff? And then, essentially it can ruin the relationship purely based on timing. Had they met 10 years later, then it would have been sweet.
Well,
but then 10 years later, they would have been different people as well.
Exactly.
So
it's a lot of luck, a lot of timing, and be very, very appreciative of who you have. And not just with relationships, but I've seen it more and more since coming out here and trying to surf, is that it's not necessarily about how good you are at surfing or how good you are at riding the wave. You will get better over time. The more important thing is being out there and your positioning. Because anyone who's ever surfed beforehand will know that positioning is absolutely key. And if you want something, you've got to position yourself well, and you've got to be there to take the opportunity. And there's a massive amount of luck, because no matter how well you position yourself, it might just not happen. And to take that as an analogy towards relationships or meeting people, and then also to your traveling and all the things that happen in your life, as in the great things, the bad things, of how I ended up traveling in the first place, is like one of the worst things that ever happened to me in the life or in anyone's life that could have happened to them, turned into what now I wouldn't change for anything because of the life I now lead. You don't
What
always
was it,
get
if
to
you don't mind me
choose.
asking?
It was a drug-induced nervous breakdown back in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah,
Whoa.
wow,
Blimey.
explosive. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that bad.
Why that bad and also very publicly humiliating at the same time.
Oh, that hurts.
Yeah,
What
it's
drugs?
LSD, obviously.
That's a pretty bad one to have as well.
Go on, I'll go. I'll give you the very brief
Okay.
side of it. I don't want to go into. I don't need to go into it massively. I've talked about it before on here.
Okay, cool, cool, cool.
But
Give me the
effectively,
info.
it was during lockdown. I was living with some mates and we were just smoking loads, taking loads because it was just fun to do. I was 21, 22 at the time, and I'd just taken too much LSD, and then I effectively just ran out in front of a car and got hit by a car.
Wow.
And the car fortunately had a dash cam, and then the dash cam footage went all over my local area. And I was like, oh shit. And the worst part was, as what happens,
Oh,
was because of the drug, I was butt naked.
that is kind of incredible, but also like I'm sorry that happened to you, but it's like
It's hilarious. No, it's hilarious.
it's look, look. I feel bad that it happened, but also it's like that. Like people go through their whole lives and never experience anything like that. you
Oh
know,
God,
but
yeah.
yeah. But it's like
It
it's and the thing is, I guess at the end of the day, it's like if this was one of the things that made you who you are today, God, can you imagine looking back when you're going to be 50 and being like, look at this thing that I did, look at my ass on camera, like that's going to be, I don't know. I don't know. Like, it's like, I get that it's a really tough thing, but it's also, yeah, it's kind of amazing.
well, the
You know?
reason I see it as amazing, also the thing itself isn't by any
No,
stretch. As the person, it's
no,
not. And it's a lot. It takes a lot of dealing with to get through and working through my own head and issues and blah 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 blah. As any kind of
absolutely.
episode would.
Yeah.
However, I look at the life and the trajectory that I was on before,
Hmm.
and I look at the life and the trajectory that I'm on now, and can single handedly say that without that one experience, I would not be doing the things I'm doing now, and I would not have the opportunities that I have now, and I would not have, it would never have come to me to do, to live the life that I want to live because it gave me, one, a very, very real feeling of, you know, life's not guaranteed. And then
Yeah, absolutely.
the drugs themselves put all sorts of ideas in your head at the same time, like, wow, you're very, very introspective at that moment.
Yeah. It's a
And it
very
kind of
spot
made me,
moment to be hit by a car.
yeah. And then just made me reevaluate things a hell of a lot, which then put me on course to where I am now. After,
Okay, I've got a couple of questions about this.
go ahead.
So, my first question is: do you still take drugs?
No.
Okay.
Occasionally, just
My
a
second.
little bit of weed, not very rarely though, just
Yeah.
more as like a little thing with mates or a treat.
Okay. Very good. My second question: do you drink alcohol?
Not so much anymore, no. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
do, but only like, again, every couple of weeks, nice little treat, sunset, beers, barbecue, the Australian way of
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. No, it is. It's look. It's. I mean, yeah. Alcohol's a really funny one, I think, but I'll follow that up in a second. Third question: were you traveling before it happened, or did it spur this kind of lifestyle that you're living?
Well, I'd always wanted to. I always knew that I was going to, eventually. As I said beforehand, my dad was a born again hippie. Suppose, well, not technically, but his first car was a Volkswagen Beetle. We always went on camping trips in a
Very nice.
Volkswagen Combi. Uh, travel as much as we could was like the kind of the mantra. And he'd said to me before all this, was like, look, if you wanted to go to Australia and just do loads of drugs and sit on the beach, I'll pay for your plane ticket. Like, go and do it because I never got to, effectively. So I'd always
Yeah.
wanted to. But in my head, it was always a case of, yeah, I'll always be able to. It's not really that urgent. And then COVID came along, and I was like, oh shit, I can't actually do it now. I'll just spend COVID saving up to go afterwards.
Yeah.
Didn't manage to save a penny during COVID because of how much we were spending on this, that, and whatever.
Yeah.
Living with mates, and it was me and a mate who lived together. We're like, right, we're going to go and do it together afterwards. But it didn't end up happening. So it was kind of, I was probably going to go traveling, but the type of person I was beforehand versus the type of person I was, or am now afterwards, post experience, would have had very different types of trips and traveling experiences and have a very different sort of collection of friends.
Yeah, look, that makes sense. I think that, you know, like, I'd be interested to hear what happened to your friend who didn't come. Did he do any travel or did he not? Did he just stay at home?
So he did beforehand. Beforehand, he did a season in New Zealand, a ski season, and he kind of
Yeah,
sold me on the idea of I want to do a ski season. I'd love to do a ski season. So I wasn't supposed to go do the season in Greece in the summer. It's just
yeah,
because of the time of year that I applied. The winter spots were already taken. I was applying for the summer afterwards because I didn't really want to. I didn't really care too much about the summer. But the premise was that if you come and do the summer, we'll then take you on to do the winter. But he was kind of the inspiration for that for me. And then we'd always talk about when we were sitting in the garden smoking weed. It's like, oh, let's just get a van and travel Australia. This is what we want to do. We'd make silly little videos or TikToks of us both like surfing and whatever. And this is like what we want to be doing together. But then post all of this happening, he didn't actually end up going traveling. He's moved to a different area. He's had his own tough experiences family wise and whatnot. So it's not going to speak too much on it. But he
no,
has his reasons. He hasn't got the kind of, he's not as in a privileged position as I or yourself are to be able to just
yeah,
kind of drop everything and go and travel.
yeah. No, look, and that's, that's again another reminder about the privileged nature of what we do. That, I think it's just, one of the things that I just find interesting about that is that, you had this plan with this guy, and you guys were like, "We're gonna do it. It's gonna be amazing," and then one of you ends up doing it, and the other one doesn't. I mean,
Mm.
like, but in doing so, I mean, like, you now are traveling around Australia with a missus, and it's like the experiences get completely different, but it's also like going to be rewarding in a completely different way as well.
Yeah. Oh, as you already know from traveling on your own and then traveling with a partner, it is two very completely different experiences. And
Yeah.
you've probably, if you're anything like me anyway, at some point you'd probably think, which one would you like to have? But then you've also got to appreciate both of them for their own merits. Sort of different horses for different courses. There's a time and a place for everything.
I'm massive on with a partner. I know that it's like without a partner, you can do what you want and you can go wherever, and it's just the world's your oyster. I think when you travel on your own, you leave yourself open to making more friends because you're more approachable as an individual than you are as a group. But what I would say is that a lot of the people that I've met when I went traveling alone, I don't speak to anymore. Haven't heard from them in forever. And one of the things that I find that is one of my favorite things about traveling is like remembering old things that happened, because the moment happens and it's amazing, then the moment's gone. And the only time that moment will ever come alive again is when you're with the people who experienced it. Like, there's so many moments that when I'm with my friends and one of them will bring it up and we'll like, I've got a friend who can say like a few words and then immediately an image will come into my mind and we'll just piss ourselves laughing. And we don't have to say any more than that. We don't have to do anything else. It's just this one word or like a couple of words and it conjures up these feelings. And so I think that having that to me is way more valuable than the flexibility and freedom of traveling alone.
Yeah, 100%. And it's I feel like it's almost for myself anyway. It was that kind of passing of age thing, where this is the life you can live as a young male in particular, or female. I can only speak from my own experience, obviously, of being sort of teenage years, early 20s, having all this freedom at once you come out of sort of schooling, and you're now free to go and make certain mistakes and have all this fun and with very little care for yourself. In reality, you can go out and drink every single day, do this and whatever, and until something comes and hurts you, uh, you're none the wiser, and that
Yeah,
can
I
go on
see.
for a long time. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I mean, so how did you end up meeting? So what's your partner's name? Sorry.
Steph.
Steph. How did you meet Steph? Was it whilst traveling?
No, we met. My friend had a crush on her when he was like 15, and so he made me go. The first time we met, he made me go into the video store, and she worked at a local video store in the neighborhood, and he made me go in and speak to her for him. So that was the first time I met her. Then we went to like similar like parties when we were like 16, 17, 18. And then it was actually, we hooked up when we were traveling in Laos. So in Laos, we went and did this thing, tubing, which used to be a massive party. It still exists, but not in the same capacity that it used to. But basically, yeah, when we were tubing, we hooked up, and then we came back home. I kept traveling. I went through the rest of Laos and Cambodia, and then I ended up coming home. She'd been home for a little bit, and then yeah, she basically said, "Do you want to keep hanging out?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not? Let's do it." And that was back in 2008, and yeah, we're still together.
Awesome. So you've done most of your traveling has been
Yeah,
with
pretty
Steph.
much. Well, look, so I did yes and no. So there was a mate who I spent a lot of time traveling around the US with, and so a lot of my US, like I lived in the US with Steph, but I did a lot of travel around there with one of my buddies. I also did this trip from China to Portugal. With a lot of it was with my brother, and so like I was with my brother until I got to Greece, and then I met her in Greece, and then we went from Greece to Portugal together.
Oh, beautiful.
Um, we've done a lot of the stuff we've done together. But there's also some stuff that I've done individually. Like, I went to Myanmar with my buddies. I've done India with the same group of guys as well. Like, there's a bunch of places I've been to without her, but for the most part, generally speaking, if I'm talking about a trip that I've done it with her. Unless otherwise mentioned, it was with her.
So you did most of that together from when you. So you did you start off doing Southeast Asia in Thailand?
I mean, when, okay, my travel, God, I mean, I'll say history, resume, whatever you want to call it. So the first thing I did, the first like proper travel I did was I taught English to blind kids in Hanoi.
Oh
That
wow,
was in
was that a TEFL,
2006.
or did you not
No,
need a
no,
TEFL? I
it was
take it then.
honestly, no, I haven't done any of that. No, it was basically like there was a hospital that had a blind school attached to it, and I knew some of the doctors who were doing like basically it's like doctors go internationally and do work in places. It's really just an excuse for them to go internationally and get drunk and like hang out. Like it's not real. They don't do any work. And one of them knew about it, and they said, "Oh, there's a blind school here. There's like a family friend." And she was like, "There's a blind school there. They need a teacher. Do you want to come out?" And I was like, "Yes," immediately. Like going to Hanoi, and so ended up going to Hanoi and teaching. And that was in 2006. Then during university, me and my buddies, we decided that we were going to do 3 months around Southeast Asia. So we're just going to go Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. And so we bounced around there. And it was during that period that I ended up hooking up with Steph in Laos. And then we started dating after that. And then when we finished university, like a year or two later, was when I did my big trip, which was basically a year away, going from China to Portugal overland, and then flew back to Southeast Asia and ended up just like living in Thailand for a bit. And so spent a bunch of time in Thailand. And then ever since then, there's been a bunch more things. But that was
So
kind of
just
how it all
tell me a
started.
little bit more about this. So you say obviously you make it sound so nonchalant that oh yeah, just the trip I took from China to Portugal by land. There's like, a
Yeah,
lot more to it than that, I'm sure.
yeah. So it was basically it was like my brother was moving to Paris, and he was like, let's go, like, like he wanted to go there, and I was drunk one night, and I said to him, because I was planning on going to Europe as well, like everyone in Australia, you finish uni, you just go to Europe for the summer, it's the thing to do. And I was like, oh, I'm going to Europe too. We'll hang out, it'll be great. And then I sort of was like, oh, but it's so like boring just like flying to Europe. Like, let's do something, let's get there somewhere different. And because my dad did this trip where he drove basically from Australia to London, and a lot of the places he went through at the time we couldn't go through, like, we couldn't do it. It's like going through like Afghanistan, which it was his favorite country. Like a lot of the places like that, you just couldn't do it. So we're like, well, we can't replicate that trip, and nor do we want to deal with the kind of because like when you travel across a border with a van, like
It's a lot of
it's
paperwork, which can
a lot of
well
paperwork.
maybe beforehand they just kind of tick it and let you through, but now it kind of takes months in advance of planning. You have to know the
It's
exact dates. You're going to be there for how long
and
and blah 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 blah. blah.
you need your carnets, you need all this stuff, and the headache of it is just too much. And so basically, yeah, like we thought about it and we're like, well, we can't drive because it's just we know ourselves, we're too lazy, we're not going to organize it, we're just going to be like, nah. And so we're like, what's an alternative? And we're like, well, let's get the trains from China through Mongolia across Russia because ancestrally we're Russian. So my grandfather was Russian, and so we were like, okay, cool, let's get the trains across Russia, and we'll go up to St. Petersburg, and then we'll cut in through Eastern Europe and make our way down to Greece, where I was going to meet Steph. And so that's how it started. And so yeah, we did the trains, we did the Trans-Siberian, which was an incredible
Wow.
experience. It was, and this was also like my friends did it recently, or recently they did it in 2018, but that's still recent enough in this day and age. And they were talking about all these things that they had for it, and I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, mate, we didn't even have a PowerPoint in our room. I saw it like a place to like plug in our chart. If we wanted to chart, one of us had an iPod. So this was back that long ago. Like we didn't even have phones. We had one iPod to share between three of us. And so like you'd have to plug it into a wall outside in the hallway. So we'd be sitting in the hallway listening to music, and it was like that and books. That was the only forms of
Wow.
entertainment.
I love that though. I love in my head, in my heart of hearts, I love that. And I try to kind of manipulate my own travels and what I do to have more of those experiences, kind of artificially. Because
Yeah,
again, you got to think for as easy as travel is now, it's also a lot more complicated because you feel like you have to take all these things. Like right now, I've got an iPad in front of me. I've got a camera here. I've got a microphone. I've got a laptop. I've got all the wires, battery packs, and all sorts. It's like you had an iPod. And yes, that makes things more difficult, but it also means you can just kind of be centered on where you are and you can just take it all in.
your brain goes to some crazy places, and it's awesome. Like you just sit and I remember we had this one long massive conversation with this dude who was another Australian randomly in the carriage with us. He was a cop, and he was talking about what we would do if our carriage was attacked by bandits, and how we would all get into defensive positions. And so he just basically orchestrated us for the probably like a good 2 hours, and
Just
we
doing
went around
drills.
just like doing drills, planning our defense against bandits because we were so fucking bored. Right? It's like you got nothing else to do. It's like, what can you do? You can drink vodka, or you can read a book, or you can practice your defensive maneuvers. And we decided to practice our defensive maneuvers. We did that. And, you know what I mean? It's like, when you don't have the constant, like getting bored is super valuable. It's like an amazing thing to be bored because you
Oh,
do
yeah.
fucking crazy shit.
So, out of curiosity, what is the defensive maneuver for if your
So the
train was to
defensive
get
maneuver,
attacked by bandits?
okay, if it was to get attacked by bandits, basically what we would do is everyone would position in the top corners of, so when you have the bunk, it's kind of hard to explain, but basically you enter the door and then you've got two bunks either side and then you've got a bunk above them. And so what we'd do is we'd be back here, so top bunks all pointing down, and when the first person came through, one person was to jump onto the person and twist their body up while the other person was to grab their gun. So like one person jumps down, twists, and then the other person jumps down, gets gun, and then we've got a weapon. And so we then picked the people who would be doing the twisting and doing the weapon grabbing. And
Love it.
but you know what? But that's
I
it,
love
right?
it.
It's
I
like,
love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
yeah. So it's just sheer boredom, sheer boredom, and like your imagination goes crazy, and it's fantastic. It's a fantastic experience. But right now, it's like a lot of the time that you know the easiest thing is to just
hmm
do that. And like
I mean,
like I've got my Spotify playlists, I've got my games or whatever, and I don't know, it's kind of it's a different.
I feel the annoying part is, from my perspective anyway, is if I were to try and emulate those kind of experiences, it's not so much me putting away my phones and devices and saying no, not today. It's the fact that the kind of general ethos of people, if you're on a train or a bus or whatever it might be, is you keep your eyes down, you don't talk to anyone. And that's kind of whether or not you're in those situations where everyone may not have a phone or a device or whatever it might be. Everyone's kind of, it's drilled into their own head and they're so skilled at avoiding contact at any opportunity that people are so out of practice with it. They're so out
Yeah.
of practice with it.
Yeah, I think I would. So, interestingly enough, one of the places that I've never traveled to is South America. So, I've never been to South America before, which is definitely going to be one of the next ones on my list. But I imagine that's also cultural in a way. Because from my understanding, like I was speaking to a buddy who just came back from Santiago, and he was saying one of the things that he noticed the most about like going around there is everyone just talks to you. Like, everyone's just talking, and he's like, "Do these people all know each other, or do they just chat? Is that it? Like, how does this work?" So like it could be a case of like, yeah, like, I mean, me, you're British, I'm Australian. Like, we have very much been programmed to be like, "Oh my god, don't talk to me, fuck off."
Mm.
But like, maybe in different cultures, it's not quite the same. So maybe it's about like us getting out and seeing some places where it is like, all right, let's try and make a conversation. Let's see how it goes.
I hope so. I mean, I have a friend who's just done South or Central and South America. Well, not last winter. So I keep getting the winters and the summers mixed, being from the northern hemisphere.
Mate, east and west, winter, summer,
Yeah, it's all the
it's
same,
tough. Tough out
same
there,
but
mate.
different.
Yeah,
But so he was saying, and this is the benefit of doing it all kind of unplanned, and when you just kind of go into a hostel, is that you very much just cling to the people around you for security and comfort. That you do make great friends with these people, and you are on these things where eventually, if you're traveling a long period of time with somebody, your devices will die. Like
yeah,
there's no ifs or buts about it. Doesn't matter how many battery packs you've got, the devices will die, and eventually you will have to basically do it the old school way, which I cannot wait for.
yeah. Look, it's. I mean, I don't want to be one of those old cynical bastards who say it was better back then, but I kind of feel like it was better back then. Oh, I hate saying
You
it.
don't want to be a lost boy.
I don't. I absolutely don't. Like, I don't want to be one of those dudes because they, like, so many people say it, like, oh, it was better back then. I'm like, look, it's not. It's different. It's just different. Like, I would say that there's Google Translate, right? I was in Taiwan recently, and I wouldn't have been able to read a single menu, not a single one, because they're all in, they're written in Mandarin. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to read this at all. So my options were to just point at something. Like this, when I was in Beijing, this is what we did. Like back in the day, I would just point, be like that, and then something would come out, and it might be absolute shit. Might be chicken feet, might be gizzards, it might be whatever. Like you just don't know, and
I had this
that
in China. On the way to, not in China, sorry, on the way to Australia, we stopped in the Taiwan Strip, and we
Taiwan,
didn't
man.
we didn't manage to leave the airport. Unfortunately, we were there for
Oh,
10 hours on the transfer, but we couldn't leave the airport. But there was
yeah.
a restaurant when the whole menu is it? I presume it was. Is it? Do you speak Taiwanese or is it Chinese still?
So interesting. Okay, this is going to be very fascinating. They speak Mandarin as the main language, I'm fairly certain, although there is a bunch of different regional dialects. There's like 16 languages. And so,
Mm.
like, some of the languages, depending on where you are in the island, you'll hear, like, some of them sound a lot more like Bahasa, like Indonesian. It's really bizarre. Like, it's like you'll hear it on the train, they'll do these different languages. And I remember the first time I heard it, and I was like, is that Indonesian? Like, what the hell? Like, why would they have this? And it was like, yeah, it's because there's a bunch of different regional dialects. Some of them are dying out, but some of them, like, there's news, like, there's like radio stations that are all based in these individual dialects. And so, yeah, for the most part, they speak Mandarin, but there's also like a lot of like really distinctly Taiwanese words that I I said there's a thing basically where you say something's amazing and you say sweet la, and that's how you say like something's amazing in Taiwan. And I tried it at like a Mandarin restaurant, and they were sort of like, huh? So I think it's like very specific to Taiwan. They were just like looking
It's
at
like
me like,
white boy want order.
yeah, exactly. 不好意思,不好意思. But yeah, no. So um, yeah, like I don't know. I kind of stole
I
that
mean,
away from you, but
to me, unfortunately, and I wish it was this way, but it just kind of is. As to my background and experience traveling, is that I couldn't tell the difference between most of the languages there, and especially if they're written down. I'm not.
yeah,
We were only there as a. I do try and attempt to obviously know the five or so general phrases you need, but we were only there just to pass through to get to Australia, and there was the
I'm so
menu.
glad.
the menu was entirely in Mandarin, Taiwanese, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so they had a picture next to them, and one of them looked like duck because it looked like a duck breast in a sort of miso soup or not, sorry, in like ramen or whatnot.
Yeah.
And it came out to me, and it was still to this day clear as day. There were not two, but three. Oddly enough, three testicles floating at the top.
Oh.
And it had the feet, it had everything else, and I was like, have they just, in my head I was thinking the broth was actually quite nice. I didn't eat try the rest of it, but I was like, it was feet or something else. And in my head I was that cynical side was, have they just kind of given the white boy the worst stuff they need to get rid of here? What's going on? Because I was like,
Yeah.
because I mean, I love the cuisine everywhere you go. The cuisine anywhere you go is,
Yeah.
for the most part, one of the things that kind of ties it all together: the aroma, the experience, the sights, the actual restaurants themselves, the whole ordering process and ritual, and how that whole thing is like part of the experience. But anywhere I go, that the food is incredible. But that was just a kind of one time, and I get it. It was just outside of or just inside an airport. But
Yeah.
ugh.
Uh, I think that I think the difference between like a lot of Western and like uh, Asian cuisine is that a lot of these countries went through periods of pretty extreme poverty, and so they learned to
Mm.
do a lot with just the
Oh no,
offcuts and
I
bits that
completely
follow.
get it. I completely
Yeah,
get it. Like, don't get me wrong. I respect it if anything, but I'm still just that we're drilled in, hypnotized. Western world is like, no, no, no. You
yeah,
only want the breast, or the leg, or the thigh. And
yeah.
then, but then
That's the worst bits, mate. You got to get like the tripe and that kind of stuff. That's the best. That's where the real good stuff is.
I'm sure you've tried a lot, and I mean a lot around China and Asia in particular.
Oh,
Because you were saying as you were taking the train through, did you go? Sorry, did you go from China almost straight to Russia first?
so no, we went China, Mongolia. So China, Mongolia, then Russia, and then Latvia, Lithuania, Czech Republic, Poland, and just went through like
Yeah.
Eastern Europe.
Say because one of the things that was for whatever reason it's always been on my mind because it's just the most foreign or alien place to myself, which you've been to, is that kind of central slash western China,
Yeah,
which those kind of areas where in my head I get the visions of the kind of rice paddies and whatnot, and however kind of fanciful it might be, that's just kind of the idea I get. It was like it's an alien world. Is there any truth to it still? Did you find some amazing places, or is it more? Were you more just in transit?
so in China, I've been to China now 3 times, 2 times, 3 times, 2 times. And one of the times I spent a month there for work in Shanghai. So I was working in Shanghai for a month, which was awesome. And then another time was to Beijing, and I went to Beijing, and that was to get on the train, and the train took us up to Mongolia. So I haven't really explored kind of like anywhere too
Mm.
central. What I would say is though that if you want to go look at some place, it's like being on the surface of the moon. Go to Mongolia. You go to
Yeah.
Mongolia, and it's like there's nothing you can really describe it to. Like there's like moments where you're on the train and you're just looking out, and there's just nothing. Like there's nothing there. You're just there's just the train, and you look at the horizon, and it's just flat, and there is nothing beyond it. And you're like,
Wow.
when was the last time you looked at the horizon and saw nothing? Like you look out into the ocean, you look out and you see mountains, you look out and see trees, you look
Do you
out and
know what?
see buildings.
Funnily enough, it was when I landed in Melbourne and we got on the coach. So we got on the bus
Yeah,
towards the city from Melbourne Airport. I remember looking around. We were so excited. We just finally got to the other side of the world, and then we get on this bus and it goes on the highway to get to St Kilda, I think it was, or near there. That's where we ended up getting off because we had no idea where we were. Again, very
yeah.
not prepared, well, not very well prepared. We looked side to side on this coach and we're like, "There's a couple trees and that is it. What have we done?"
Mate, I've honestly,
Jokingly,
you ever been to
obviously.
Melbourne? You've seen more than me, mate. I've
There you
never
go.
been there.
There you go.
It's terrible. I'm like the worst Australian tourist. I haven't seen anything.
No.
I haven't done anything around here. Everyone's like, oh, what should I do? And I'm like, oh, fucking know. Go to Sydney, go to the beach, hang out. I got some good like if you want to go to good Thai restaurants, I got some recommendations, but that's about it.
I mean, I feel like around Australia that you guys have just some of the most incredible beaches in the world, and it almost
Yeah,
seems as if a lot of Australians don't seem to care.
I would absolutely agree. I think that a lot of Australians take it for granted, and it's not until you go and you see a bunch of other beaches around the world that you realise how good our beaches are. And
Mm.
it's one of the reasons why, like when I used to travel a lot when I was younger, I used to be like, oh, I want to go to a place with a really nice beach, and I always used to say this, and then I got to the point where I'm like, why the fuck am I going traveling for beaches? I live like right next to the best beaches in the world. There is absolutely no
The
point
East
me.
Coast is some of the
Yeah,
best in the
and
world.
and that's it. It's like right now I can, it's going to take probably when we finish this call, I'm going to spend 15 minutes walking down to the beach. And I'm going to go for an arvo swim, and it's going to be in a beach that anyone else in the world would see that beach and they'd be like, "You're in paradise." And for me, I'm like, "Oh, it's just DY. It's just the local beach down there." Like, oh, I don't
I
care
mean,
about it.
even then, if you
It's,
look at, so you've got the more built up ones, obviously your Bondi, Bronte, obviously DY. We spend a lot of time around freshwater in the van 'cause it's
yeah,
just a nice
Freshy's
area and
great.
it's beautiful.
Yeah,
And you've got obviously Manly Beach as well.
Freshy's the beach that I grew up going to. So Freshy was like my local as a kid. So I'd go up, and that was, yeah, we'd go and get the bus up there and
I
spend
mean,
Saturdays there every week.
absolutely stunning. And then you can
Yeah,
go just literally 5 minutes up to the next beach and it's almost barren. And I was sitting there, well, we walked up, we did the Manly to DY
yeah,
walk. And then we got to DY and we went just a little bit further. And we were like, this beach, you can almost see the next 20 to 30 years, the way how Australia's going and property and whatnot, that this beach, which is at the moment barren, will be a very built up outskirts popular area. So in such a way where DY kind of is. Because I know when you walk
yeah,
along DY and you've got the pools, you've got the pictures on the side of what it
yeah,
used to look like back in, I can't remember what the decade was, but it's a black and white photo and it looks exactly like the beach, which is just next door.
yeah, yeah.
And again,
It's just, but then as well, like you go up closer to the central coast, and you go, just like, an hour outside of Sydney, you go down to the south coast as well, and you'll be able to find it. So I think inner city it'll go, but you don't have to look very far to find it in
mm,
Australia, particularly around this neck of the woods.
well, I'm from the UK and we've got some of the best countryside there is in the world, in my opinion. And it looks
Yeah,
absolutely stunning. Some of the worst beaches. I grew up in the Midlands, so right in the centre of the country, which still isn't too far from any beach. The nearest beach to me is probably like I think about a 2 hour drive,
yeah.
which to an Australian is nothing, but that's big drive for somebody from the UK.
So when you say the Midlands,
Hmm.
what would be the big city in the Midlands? I've been to London, but honestly it was during this big trip. So like on the way, like once I made it to Portugal, I flew to London afterwards, and I hadn't been in an English speaking country in a long time. And so when I got there, I went to the Tesco and I was like, "Excuse me, where's the cheese?" And he was like, "Over there," and I like burst into tears. I'm like, "Oh, that was so amazing." Uh, and and
Love
so
it.
it and so I ended up just staying in my cousin's house in London, and we just played Monopoly and drank beer. And I didn't leave. I went to the local pub, and I didn't see any of London. I just basically hung out because I was like, that's all I wanted to do.
Well, London
So
in
what's Midlands? Where's Midlands?
so
What
the
am I?
Midlands is exactly as it says on the tin. It's the middle lands.
Yeah,
So it's
right.
right in the middle of the country, or in the middle of England, not the United Kingdom, but pretty close to the middle of the United Kingdom. The
Is,
nearest
is it
big
near? Is it near
cities,
Manchester?
yeah. So the nearest
Okay.
big cities being Manchester and Birmingham are the
Okay.
big ones
Oh,
nearby.
cool.
But I mean,
Yeah.
everywhere in the UK is really weird because historically, people didn't travel around much, which is why even though we're so small, every city or town or village has its own accent and
Yeah.
has its own kind of dishes and cultures, and it's very like a world. Because for a lot of time as well in the UK, because most of it was very sort of I don't know what the word is, where you can sort of
Agrarian.
that's the one. You got it, Mr. Rata.
Yeah.
um, sorry. So
No, you're right, bro.
nobody really travelled around too much, and everywhere's got its own history, and people kind of stayed there. So the dialect. So you might notice mine is a more northern accent. But
Yeah.
if you travel half an hour towards Birmingham, but not quite Birmingham, you've got a place called Rugeley. And usually they all sound a little bit like this, and it sounds really strange. And you've definitely never heard any famous person or any English person sound like that beforehand. But then 20 minutes up the road, you've got Birmingham, where it's the same, but it's a little bit more deeper. And it's we've got the Scousers that sound a little bit like this. If you go a bit more to the west,
I've,
and
I've,
it's
I've definitely heard that accent before.
and it's this also you don't get it so much in Australia, or you do, but a lot further away. But
I think
it's
I think for us a lot of it's country versus city. So if you go to the country,
mm,
people sound different, but people in the country all sound the same. And then you go to the city, people sound different to the country, but they all generally sound the same. And then a lot of it also depends on your parents. So interestingly enough, in terms of all of my friends, there's only about two or three people perhaps that have two Australian parents. So
ah,
everyone else is like all a mixed bag. The vast majority of us have parents who are immigrants. Depending on where that's from. Like
yeah,
my dad
I've
was from
noticed a
New
lot of
Zealand.
that from different people, or yourself and other authors and writers. How well people tend to say that they are first or second generation Australian, and it
Yeah,
at first it I don't think too much of it now because so many people say it, but I kind of clicked on straight away. It's like that's a kind of a strange statement. You're Australian. Does it?
yeah.
What's going on?
Well, it's a funny cultural thing, right? Like it's like because I was raised by a French woman, so a lot of my sensibilities would be closer towards what you'd expect in France, not in Australia. Um, my dad was from New Zealand, and obviously there's some connections between Australia and New Zealand, but my dad passed away when I was incredibly young, and so I never really had his influence on my life. So, it becomes this thing where it's like, as a country that's as young as we are, that has as much migration as we do, like even, I read something a little while back about how, when I was growing up, did you have like, okay, did you have a dish that your family used to eat when you were growing up? Like something that's like, this is our family meal that we're going to go and have.
Uh, not so
What
much,
was it?
not so much family, but local. Again,
Yeah.
in the area I'm from is the Potteries, Staffordshire
Yeah.
in particular, and there's something that's there which is nowhere else in the world, and it's called an oat cake.
An oat cake. Yeah.
It's not a cake, it's not a dessert. It's absolutely delicious, but it's effectively like a breakfast wrap.
Okay. Like, see, that's amazing, right? So for my family growing up, the meal, like whenever we'd have a special family meal, we'd go to a Thai restaurant.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And it's like Australia's been so impacted by migrants. It's we're still trying to figure out what we are as a country. Like, I don't think we really understand it because obviously we're so young, and our identities. Like how Australian do do we feel as individuals? Like I don't have Australian parents. Like, how does that
Mm.
impact the way I feel about Australia? Like, I remember there was times when I used to be embarrassed to be Australian. So there'd be times
Really?
when we were traveling, when like years ago, like because when I was particularly when I was doing this trip around Southeast Asia, the one probably back in 2008, there'd be a lot of Aussies going around getting completely shit faced and just making asses of themselves. And so like a lot of the times you come into somewhere and you say I'm Australian, and people would roll their eyes. Oh, here we fucking go. Australians are
You're
here.
saying this to me like but that is so around Europe, that is almost the exact kind of sensibility or sentiment that you get from the Brits, from
Yeah,
British hooliganism around Europe.
yeah. And
There's
for
I mean,
me, that
even to
was
this
all.
day, even to this day with my travels around Europe, there's a lot of places where, and obviously it's slightly different in different areas where depending on where you go because of how many Brits there are as tourists. But there's some places where after a certain time they do not allow Brits in because of how bad they know they can be after they've had a few
Yeah,
drinks.
yeah. I mean, but it's just one of those things where when I saw it, I would be like, I'm ashamed to be Australian, and so I'd tell people that I'm from New Zealand because
Wow.
technically, I mean, like my dad's from New Zealand, right? And a lot of the times I feel, sometimes I feel more closely connected. Like when I go back to New Zealand to visit my family, I always feel a great sense of belonging that I don't necessarily feel here at times. And so, it's just one of these weird things. I guess it's just like, when you come from such a young country, and particularly when you are brought up in a certain way. Like I was brought up in a way that was very much like, and part of this can also be partially to blame on my mum. But she was very much just like, you're Australian, you're not Australian, you're European, blah blah blah. Like, gave me that mindset,
Mm.
which I think is partially the cause of why I've travelled so much. But it's also like it's just something to be like, when you say you're first generation Australian, it's just one of those things where it's like we don't have deep roots here. Like
Yeah.
there's no, it's not like we can't look back and see where we've come from or whatever. Like if I was to look back and find out where I've come from, it would be somewhere in Scotland and like Georgia and Armenia and Ukraine, right? So it's like when you go back that far, I've never been to Scotland, so I can't imagine how I'd feel when I see it. But like, there's certain places where you go and you feel a kind of connection to it, and I just don't really feel that here per se. I don't know.
Well, one thing I did read a while ago, which I do kind of get the sense of now already, is that especially when you start traveling from such a young age, as in early till teens or early 20s, that the more you travel around and the more you are sort of consistently away from home, you do get a sense that you are now kind of just drifting, and that you don't feel as if you do have a particular home, which is like that homely warm feeling that you might get, especially like around the Christmas time, whatever it might be. Like you don't kind of have that sense of this is me, this place holds a bit of me, purely because you've traveled around and then you've found that you can have such an amazing time and incredible experiences elsewhere, that you're no longer tied to the experiences that you had when you were a child.
Yeah, I look. I think that I always find that home isn't a place, it's a person, right? Like when you have a home, it's like it's more about people because, like when I go back and I see the house that I grew up in, I'm like, oh, it's like a little bit nostalgic, but I don't necessarily feel too much. Like I don't have all these memories of it. And then, like I'm like, oh my God, this place and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, but it's like when I think about people, like when I think about a lot of my friends and the things that we did growing up, it's like I find that they are more like the home. They're the home that
Mm.
I'm kind of looking for. But like I say, like a lot of this when I say first generation Australian and talking about this sense of identity and whatnot, you do. I think when you travel, you do get a broader sense of like that people have been migrating around the world for you know a long time, and
In
people
ways,
will
in our
continue
nature.
migrating around. Yeah, like people will continue to do it, and I think that there's that if you don't feel like necessarily a connection to where you're from or a particularly strong connection to where you're from, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, right? There's a lot of people who leave their homes and make new ones. Like the friend that I was mentioning to you earlier, who came out from the UK, was meant to stay a few months, and then ended up he's been here for like 10 years. He went home recently, and he went back and was just like, it's just stressful. Like he goes back home and he's like, I'm stressed because I go back and I got to see people, but everyone wants to see me on their terms. They don't want to see me like it's like I have to go and you know I'm
Mm.
traveling to go and see them around London and around the UK, and they're not coming to see me, but I'm here for a very specific amount of time, and I've traveled halfway around the world, and it's always on their terms. And I get home, and I'm not. He doesn't have that sense of peace that comes with being at home. And then when he gets
Mm.
back to Australia, he's like, "Oh my God, thank God I'm home."
Yeah.
Like he's like,
Yeah,
"Thank,
I get
thank,
that.
thank God I'm home from." You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah, I
like,
get it. I mean, I mean that again. I feel like it comes to that where you draw the line between travel versus tourism.
yeah,
Where I said to Katie beforehand, like I don't want to go home for any long period of time at this stage in my life, as in the UK. But I'd love to take a holiday at home. I'd love to go
yeah.
home on holiday, which sounds so bizarre to say now, but it's to me that's what it would be. It's what it would feel like. Is that if I were to go home at some point for say 2 3 weeks, it would be a holiday. It'd be a holiday from my life being
But
this adventure.
having done it multiple times, because lived in LA and would have to come home, and you come home for 2 weeks and it's chaos because every single it's like because when you go on a holiday, you do exactly what you want, right? You go, you're like, I want to go here, I'm going to go here, I'm doing this, I'm just hanging out, having a great time. When you go home for a holiday, imagine a holiday, but you have to see 20 people. So you have to schedule in those 20 people
Yeah.
over 2 weeks. And so you're like, and if you don't see some of those people, they're going to be upset. And they're going to let you know, they're going to be like, why didn't you come and see me when you were home? And you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm sorry, I only have so many
So
hours in
I'm
a day.
sorry, I'm just going under a train under a bridge.
Yeah, yeah. But that's the thing, and that's what happens, man. Like everybody wants to see you, everybody wants to hang out. You go and like Australia has a pretty big drinking culture. So like I'd come home and everyone's be like, let's go for beers, let's do this, let's do this. And so you go out and you just end up drinking every single night of the week. You end up feeling like shit because you're drinking too much. You're going out for all these meals, but you don't really have any time to yourself. You're constantly seeing people and then at the end of it, you're exhausted. Like you're utterly spent. There is nothing holiday about it when you go home. And I used to like, it was always this thing where you'd be like, I'd always be like so sad and excited to leave at the same time, right? Like I'd be like, oh, I'm sad to leave, but I'm so excited I'm going.
No, I do get it. It's so weird. I mean, I haven't. This is the first time I've been a lot away for longer than 6 months now. Um, so 6 months. Well, beforehand it was a week, two at a time, obviously max, and then the
Yeah.
seasons were 3 months, and then 5 months, and then now I've been away 9 months. Each time I went back, it was great to see everybody. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing everybody catching up. I'd make it an effort to try and go around and meet some people, which I might not get next because I don't know the next step or where I'm going to be or how long I'm going to be there for. I don't know when the next time I'll see them might be. So we'll try and, luckily enough for my group of friends and the age we are, we have a football team back in the UK. So I could very easily go and watch one of
Fabulous.
the games, play a game if I wanted to, and then we'd all go to the pub afterwards, and they'd all be there for the most part. So I haven't got to kind of organise and arrange to go see that because I almost feel a little bit guilty of the fact that no, you have to come and see me because I really want to see you and I'm not going to be here for too long, kind of thing.
Yeah. So, completely unrelated travel question. What position do you play?
Striker. What about you?
Oh, my man, striker as well.
So what kind of striker?
So, well, it depends. So, I used to play pretty high level when I was
Oh, nice.
young. So, like when I was like 16, I was playing for a lot of like all age rep teams. So, I was like a 16-year-old playing with like all the 23, 24-year-olds who wanted to go pro.
Awesome.
And then when I was playing with those teams, I was a striker. So, playing with them,
Nice.
I'd be up front. But then when I played, basically, I got a really bad knee injury, had to have a reconstruction, and was out for a year. And
Bastard.
then when I came back, I just couldn't do it. I was like, I
Mm.
couldn't play like I used to. It's just when you have a year off and
Oh, yeah.
you're so worried about getting injured, you just never the same. And so I had a couple of mates, and it was like 4 or 5 of us who used to basically played at like a very high level, and all of us got sick of playing for the really high level teams because it kind of hit that point where it's like you either need to decide that you're going to be like you either need to commit fully
Hmm.
or you because like the thing is it was the teams where it's like if you screw up a pass they're gonna just fucking blow up at you like they're just like what are you doing like
Yeah.
and it's like it's that level and so we got to the point where we were like we're just kind of tired of this and so we started a team and it was like us 4 or 5 with about 12 other dudes who'd never played soccer in their life and so it was the best fun ever because all of our games would be like 9-5 because you'd have like all our defenders had no idea what they were
And you
doing,
up
and then
front.
it's like, yeah, well, so with these guys, the 4 of us just played midfield, so we just played midfield, and we were just like, all right, cool, and we had like some of us, like 2 of the dudes at least, they were like, we could just run through a whole team, and like if they wanted to, they'd just be like, I'm just going to run through this whole team
Yeah.
and score if they wanted to, but they never like, we never really did because it was sort of like that wasn't why we were playing, we were just doing it for fun. And so we just basically like had a mad laugh and it was just like us having a good time and it was great. Some of the best, most fun football we ever played.
That's almost very well. It's very similar. I feel like we're kind of kindred spirits. But There's very similar to what we had to what I had with my friends, where we'd all played when we were younger, with different teams and the same teams, and we'd play for like all over the place. And because there's so much football in the UK in such a small area, there's loads of divisions, loads of leagues, loads of
Yeah.
teams, and then as you get older, it splits up really into Saturday League and Sunday League. You got floodlit leagues and whatnot for those who work as well during the weekends, but mostly it's Saturday League or Sunday League. Sunday League is it's a pub team.
Yeah.
People do give a fuck, but don't give a fuck at the same time. And it's just a kick around on the worst pitches in a field. It's just muddy, groggy, horrible, and you rock up and then you'll go to the pub afterwards and no one, yes, you care, but it's not the end of the world. It's a bit of fun. Saturday League is the one where you often got the more better setup, where it's not necessarily a pro level. There's a lot of Saturday teams are almost semi-pro. Some of them have that kind of idea where, oh, it's wrong to pay players, and some of them bring in ringers and whatnot, and they take it more seriously because that's what they want to do, and it's more well-kept pitches. There's you changing room facilities and blah, 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 blah. So most people at some point decide at that same age where it's, right, which one do you want to do? They pick Saturday or Sunday, or some of the mad bastards do both because they wanted to have that competitive side of things, but then also a kick around with the mates on a Sunday. Because it's not fun when it's...
My knees are just quivering listening to that.
I know. But so I'd played at good levels when I was younger, and I'd played at terrible levels when I was younger, and I made a decision, even when I was as young as, 16, 17, yeah. We just finished high school, and it was either go play or continue playing for a good team, where I say, well, yeah, continue playing for a good team or go and play with a bunch of mates. And I was like, right, I've just left high school. I'm not going to the same college or sixth form as everyone else. I'm not going to do university with everyone else. I want to stay in touch however I could. So we played the Sunday League for a while. Then we all stopped around the 18 level because we all discovered booze and women, and life just changed forever.
Yeah, obviously.
So we all just like, I don't want to get up and be hungover and play on a Sunday anymore. I just want to go and drink. So we all did that for a few years. And then come COVID, it was during the middle of COVID, some good friends of ours said like, right, we haven't seen each other in so long. We're doing all these kind of Skype quizzes and Monopoly and whatever whilst we're drinking in a parent's house. Like, right, as soon as we can, we're going to go do something where we can enjoy ourselves again. Together, get everyone together and have an excuse to get everyone together. And I cannot thank one of my best friends in the world, Cam Scales, because he was the one who had the idea for it. Big up Cam Scales. He had the idea for it. He put a lot of work. He still does a lot of the work for it now to keep it all together because at so many points it could have failed. But he got us all together and as a big group, and we've all made friends from everywhere. And we've got a massive group of friends who now see each other very regularly every weekend. And then not only was the first season an absolute failure, as they always are, getting battered every game, terrible weather, no one turning up. We had a lot of players who'd played at a good level, some who played at a mediocre level, and then some who never played at all.
Yeah, love it.
But then, after the first sort of year, the second year we played, we ended up getting our shit together, and we actually got promoted. And then, honestly, it's you couldn't write it. It's poetry in motion. But it was... I'm going very deep into this, but the point being that it's so amazing to see. And I love to see the fact now that I was a part of that team with those guys. And even though I'm not there, they still do it now. I'll see they've got the social medias up and going as well with the team. So they're all doing. I can see the scores. I can see who scored. They have a little write up about what happened, and I know that they're all in the pub having a good time afterwards.
Dude, yeah, that's awesome. We had a similar thing with we kept getting promoted.
Lucky for some.
We ended up look, it was one of those things where the players who'd never played before got good, so they got better and better. So like we started off at like the lowest division and we won that, and we just kept winning divisions, and so we went up and went up and went up, and then it got to the point where we were like competitive. And it was sort of like, how has this happened? Like we were really like a joke team, and now we're playing like kind of like competitively. But that was around the time that I moved to the US, so I left and went to America, and I stopped playing after that. And so the guys, and because we're a bit older than you guys, eventually it hits the point where people have kids, people get injuries, everything happens, and then it falls apart. So the team is long since gone. But it was a pretty fun couple of years, just like hanging out and playing. It was really good.
Yeah, that's
really good times.
That's the one thing which I don't know if your experience has been the same as mine as of yet. Anyway, the one thing I kind of miss from the traveling with the missus in the van, which is something you wouldn't get so much if you're in hostels and traveling around, is that you don't get that big group of people all together having a laugh as often. Which is really unfortunate, because when we were in Greece, when we were in France, I've got a friend of mine, Danny, she says to us, she loves it because you've got built-in friends. Because we're all working together, we're all staying at the same place, we're all in the exact same position as each other. There's no kind of hierarchy as to or figuring each other out. You all start at the same time, you all get there and you all have a great time and then you all leave. And you become such amazing friends with these people. Where some of my best friends in the world I met in Greece and in France. And now being out here I knew straight away that because I'm not in hostels, I'm not going to be making as many friends, especially whilst I'm working a lot and I've not got the time to go out or I don't want to go out and spend the cash that I'm saving up to travel with
Yeah.
on going out on nights out with these people because I'm like tossing up and down. But
So one of the reasons why I ended up moving home is also because of the sense of community. Like you talk about like this community, right? And these people that you're around, like when you're traveling, you do not get a sense of community. And what we
mm,
experienced is those places that we went to, like particularly Gyeongju in South Korea, was just amazing little town we went to, and we befriended like basically there's like I call it a mafia. It's not a mafia. It's just a bunch of like really talented, awesome young people who have these
mhm.
amazing bars and restaurants. Like one of the best pizza places in the world I've ever been to is in this small town in Korea. It's
Wow.
absolutely incredible, and the dude is like he's awesome. He trained on he like basically watched YouTube videos to learn how to make good pizza dough, and his pizza dough is like and you get all these Italian
Oh
customers
God,
coming
the
in,
world
and
of
they're like,
YouTube.
I know, but he's like, oh my god, like Italians come in and talk to him. They're like, you must have trained in Italy, like you must have, and he's like, no, I basically have just been learning from YouTube. But anyway, we would like basically this big crew of us would just go out to bars and like hang out, and we spent all this time together, and it was just incredible, like having that
Mm.
sense of community. And we were there for a month, and then afterwards, gone. And that was one of the reasons that we wanted to come, home for a bit, is to try and build a sense of community around our lives
Mm.
because it was so.
That community you don't you kind of realize that when you were younger, especially going to school and around the area that like where you grew up, that those things are there and like it's kind of built in. You do take them for granted, and it is something that you kind of need to and kind of actually implement yourself as you kind of travel and realize friendships can be so fleeting sometimes. Sometimes they carry on, sometimes they don't, and it's like you want that with what you do, which is one of the reasons for me starting this podcast in particular. I do have a dream that eventually further down the line when I've done hundreds of episodes and I've done spoken to so many people like yourself and I made such good friends that
Throw a
I can add
radio.
us all to I can add us all to a group chat and say, right, who's where, who's traveling where, let's like actually meet up and it's all kind of like-minded people. Which
That's
yes,
mad.
there's Facebook groups for it all and there's all these different things, but one thing I have missed, especially traveling by van, not by a hostel, is that kind of that group mentality. Like having that around, implementing it into my life, speaking to people who I want to speak to, and it's something that I'm only learning more so now. Isn't just kind of it's it's not a feature of life unless you make it a feature.
I read the other day I read someone say this. I'm going to pretend that I wrote it, but I stole it. So but I'm going to pretend
As
I
all
wrote
good
it.
artists do.
Yeah. No, it's a part-time job, right? It's
Mm.
making a community, having friends. It's a part-time job. Yeah, you absolutely have to put like you're talking about your mate running the football. You have to put in work if you want it, and a lot of the times it's like that can slip away from you because life. As you get older, you have kids, you have all this other stuff. Like currently, the problem that I'm going through about moving home is you move home and you have this expectation that you're going to come home and you're going to see everybody and you're going to have a really good time with all of your friends and it's going to be great. And then you like don't end up seeing anyone because they all have their kids and they're busy and people have jobs and the windows in which people can operate are just so like okay. So I went and saw a mate last night for dinner and we talked about how good it would be to do trivia. And so we sent a group chat with my other mates to be like, we're going to go do trivia on this night. Does everyone want to join? And then everyone was basically like, sorry, can't do it because, I've got
Yeah,
kids.
not because
I
they
have
don't
to
want
make
to,
plans.
but
No, and it's not
yeah,
that it's not that they don't want to. It's just none of them have the capacity to. And so, it's one of those things where it's like when you move home, hoping to make a community and hoping to like, or step back into your old community, but that community doesn't have the time to do the things that they used to. That's the dilemma that I'm currently facing because obviously for you, you go home to the UK and you've got all your mates in the football team and you have access to that. And it's really easy. For me, it's bloody hard to get my friends out and to do stuff. Like it's an effort, it's a challenge, and it's like I'm trying to work through at the moment. It's like, if I've come home to have a community and I can't build it with the community that I used to have, based purely on the fact that it's just a lot harder to see them. It's like, do I start a new community? Do I want to start a new community, right? Like, is it something that I'm interested in doing? And so it's a difficult challenge, I think, for somebody who's been traveling for so long to then have to come home and figure it out. But, I'm getting through it one step at a time. I'm assuming there'll be an article about it popping out somewhat soon, but we'll see. We'll see how it ends up.
Well, I feel like it's not just yourself, and it's going to be everybody in your scenario. I have the feeling that everyone's in that kind of scenario when they get to that. There's kind of different checkpoints in life which put you in different positions, and very often or not, they kind of jump out at you out of nowhere. But now, again, the blessing in disguise with the internet, where yes, people feel so disconnected, but having that connection at the same time, is that not just being able to connect with your friends, which everyone kind of already knows through Facebook, Instagram, socials, whatever it might be, or just even just Messenger. But the fact that you can hear from people who've been in your position previously what to expect and kind of the lessons from them. Just you have to learn for your own lessons and put yourself in your own experiences. But I've heard time and time again about the struggles people have, and I've seen with different family members and whatnot, and the effort it is to try and rekindle a community or group of friends, that I'm looking at thinking, if I can do something now which can start that and maintain that and just kind of set those or plant those seeds now, I'm going to do it. That's what this podcast is for me. Like, I absolutely love it to pieces because I get to speak to amazing people, make amazing friends. The podcast itself is called Live Incredibly. I want to speak to people who are living incredibly. I want to inspire people to live incredibly.
Well, I mean,
And
I'm flattered that you'd speak to me in something that's about incredible. I don't know how incredible it feels right now.
well,
My little heart.
the way I would describe living incredibly is living life on your terms in a way that you want to, and putting actionable steps in place, and also taking actionable steps to get to where you want to be. And you can tell straight away, because those people are the ones who aren't just living lives which obviously everyone has their own reasons for doing so, but they aren't the ones who are kind of living the status quo lives.
I mean,
In that way. I'm not saying it's a negative thing.
No.
But
It's just, I don't know. It's just kind of funny when like, I think I've done like a lot of random things in my life. Like my life has been particularly random, and it's just funny just to think about, like, in terms of a lot of the things that my friends have done and the positions that they're in now versus what I've done. I think that we all have very different understanding of what incredible is. Like, I just learned from my friend that he's about to have another kid, and it's incredible. I'm like,
oh, of course.
I'm so happy for him, and he's super pumped, and I was like so excited, and but then it's like, what makes incredible, and so I get it. It's just wrapping my head around, like, what does it mean to be incredible?
And it's intentionally vague in that sense, where it's not incredible on anyone else's standards or even my standards. Is it the telltale giveaway sign for me, which is somebody who is passionate about what they do and they can speak passionately about it.
I love that.
If you can do that, then you're living incredibly. And which is why I speak to a lot of writers from Medium, because I read the stuff that they put down and I think they truly love this. They truly care about what they're doing. They speak about it. They write about it. They're putting it out into the world. Not for their benefit necessarily. It will have benefits to them. However, it's for other people as well. And they want to share and inspire others to at least open themselves up to, because a lot of people are trapped. I see a lot of people who are trapped. I've spoken to so many of my friends at home who've spoken to me about what I'm doing and saying they wish they could do that. And they wish they could do that and they just haven't been able to for whatever reason. And everyone has their own reasons / excuses, or even very real reasons that they can't do it. Whether it be family issues or health issues or whatever it might be, financial issues. But I do believe if you're passionate about something, if you're not doing it, you might at least be listening to it in a podcast, or you might be watching it on YouTube or on TV. And And if one thing can have an outreach and kind of push somebody in that direction, I'm a very happy man.
Mate, that's fantastic. I love that. I was like, a couple of things on it. Like for the people who want to do it and aren't doing it, I think the excuses are always going to be there. Like the reasons why you can't, they'll always be there. But I guarantee everything that I've ever done in my life, where I've been like, I'm just going to do this. Like, and obviously, again, very privileged. I've never had to deal with big health issues. I've always been able to like find some work, so I've had money, which has been good. Um, basically, like you're never going to regret it, honestly. And if you just do it, you're never going to regret it, but you will regret not doing it. Like you
Exactly that.
absolutely will regret not doing it, and you'll look
Well,
back. Like I've got a mate who he's taken a very different path to me. He is very financially set up as a result of his path. He's worked incredibly hard, but he looks at the way that I've lived and he's like, he wishes, like you can just see it. He's just like, and he will openly say it many times over. He's like, I wish I had done what you did, you know.
it,
And grass is always greener. I wished I lived in his house, but at the same time, there's not much you can do about that, right? You just have to make your choices, and you have to live accordingly.
yeah, and it
And
doesn't it doesn't mean
you'll
that
never
one
know in
way
the
is
next
better
20
than
years.
another.
No,
It doesn't mean that
absolutely
one
not.
way is better than another by any stretch of the imagination, because he wouldn't. I have a friend who he um had a child unexpectedly at the age of 21 or 20 or 21, and it was always in his head and it was always in his dreams that he wanted to be doing something like I'm doing now.
Hmm.
And he'll tell me this openly, like if he didn't, like don't get me wrong, he loves his kids, he loves his partner, loves everything he's doing, to my knowledge, and it seems that way. He's always got a smile on his face. He's
Yeah,
happy. He plays for the football team as well. He comes along. He does a lot for it. He loves that community. He does what he wants to within that. But it may not have been a life that he set out to do originally. But there's a lot of
I
people
mean,
for that. I mean, no one ever
few of the
does.
lives, yeah, no one ever does.
No one ever does.
Mate,
But
life is curly. It's a curly thing.
yeah,
Like you
it
never really
is.
know. I,
I mean,
like
unfortunately,
one day you're taking LSD, and then you're butt naked and you get hit by a car, right? Like it's a curly thing. It's a
unfortunately, we have to in order to learn a lesson or in order to be pushed in the right direction, we have to have. It has to go so far for you to
mm,
realize that you want to do something, and that's when we're so. I believe anyway that I'm speaking from a younger generation or from a younger age and from my experiences so far that the easiest decision is the most well trodden, and that has a path which you can very easily, well, for the most part, obviously barring tail events. You could have gone to university and then got a job straight out of university and met somebody, partnered up, had a dog, had the plant, had the dog, had the kid, and you'd be very, very happy with that. But that's more so a case, the way I look at it, that you were never fortunate slash unfortunate enough to have something to really kind of shake up your life. There was nothing that happened or no pressing matter from either when you were younger or that kind of said, right, you need to do something different to what you're doing now.
yeah. No, I mean, look, my life has certainly been I always knew I wanted to be a writer. But of it, like a lot of it is about just like taking random opportunities, right? So like I actually started out wanting to be a screenwriter. So started out wanting to be a screenwriter. Wrote a script that did well in a film festival in the US. So I went over with my buddy who wanted to be an actor. Two of us did a road trip to Austin. Had the most amazing time. We met a bunch of producers. One of the producers read my script, loved it, put it in touch with another producer who I ended up working for. So I ended up
Well,
working for this producer, like bouncing back and forth in LA. Then basically he sent me this saw an article in the New York Times about esports, so about competitive gaming, right? So he sends me this article and he's like, "We need to write about this." So I was like, "All right, fuck it." So I did a bunch of research about esports, basically got really into like learning about it and wrote this script. The script was terrible, didn't go anywhere. But when I moved to LA, there was a job writing for one of the companies that I wrote about, and just randomly I decided I'd punt an application in there. to be like, let's see if I can get a job at this company. It's like this company is called Riot Games. It'd be like the equivalent of working at Google, right? So it's like one of these massive
Oh,
companies.
sweet.
Yeah, and I ended
Oh,
up hunting an application to them, and I got the job, and ended up working for them for years. And the whole reason why I could like travel and work remotely is because I ended up working with them. Because basically what happened is I was there for 3 years, and then when I left, my manager, I was like, I'm leaving the US. Like, peace, I need to quit. And he's like, no, you don't quit. And I'm like, mate, I'm leaving the country. And he's like, I can't replace you. I'm just going to pay you, work anywhere in the world. And this is in 2018. So like this is before COVID changed everything. And so from 2018, I was just like, sweet, I can work anywhere in the world and I'll get paid. And that's like,
what?
but you know what I mean? It's like, I set out to be a screenwriter, and then I had like moderate success. Like I wrote a script with Zac Efron's brother, and like ended up hanging out with them all the time. Like it was like I did
What?
some, yeah, no, seriously, like wrote a script with them, and did like a bunch of like ended up, I don't know, like if you'd consider meeting famous people to be a marker of success, I don't believe so at all. But like met a bunch of famous people, went to some crazy parties, like did some cool shit in LA, like when I was living there, and you know, like that didn't work out, and because basically just like the money wasn't there, it was really difficult. The people I were working for were not particularly great, and I got to the point where I was like doing so much work and seeing so little result for it, and then I ended up pivoting to doing this esports stuff, which then unlocked this whole other side of life, And if you had have asked me a year before going to the US, like you're going to be writing esports content for the next 7 years, I would have been like, fuck off. There's no way I'm going to be doing that. What the fuck are you talking about? And I did it, and it was like one of the best things that I ever did. And I had no intention of doing that. It's just it happened, right? And so
Yeah, I mean
like what
that's
I'm
the
saying is like it's like you just you have the like we were saying before about how like it's like you have these paths that you tread, but like for the most part, like you have no idea what's coming. None. You
oh
have
no,
no idea
God
where
no,
you're gonna go.
fucking hell not. You
You've
could
no
walk out of your
absolute
front
clue.
door and get T-boned by a bus,
Exactly.
and like
And
that,
like
you don't know.
but like you might what happen, you're gonna go to South you're gonna go to Asia after this. You might get to Japan and you might be like, Japan's a great place on the planet. You know what? I'm gonna move here. I'm gonna buy a house in Japan because they're cheap, and I'm gonna live in Japan, and I'm gonna work as an English teacher. That might happen. You just don't know. And so like I think part of it is just making yourself open to anything and just seeing like,
Well, exactly.
yeah, when something comes towards you, just be like, great. I mean, sometimes the best thing to do when you see an opportunity is just say yes, because what's the worst that
Yeah,
happens?
and again, that positioning, that pivoting is like crucial to that, and that's something you get when you are open to new opportunities and you're excited and passionate about it. Only really being appreciative of life and the opportunities that come your way and having the foresight to grab them is what will get you there. Because you could very easily have said, "No, I'm going to try and do this," or you could have even ended up saying, "Oh, this is all too difficult, or it's too scary. I need security, and I'm just going to go teach English back in Sydney."
Yeah,
You could have gone ahead with that, and that could have been your entire plan. But then, often the higher that you reach, like it sounds corny, but that again, shoot for the stars and you'll land on the moon kind of thing, where it's you wanted something amazing, but not because of what comes of doing with as a result of that, but because it sounds fun.
yeah.
It sounds fun
So
to do that.
funnily enough, for my what happened to me in the US, I actually took what I thought was the easy route. So I was like, I need money. I'm going to go for this easy job that I'm going to do writing for this video game company. Will be sweet. Like I'm just going to do easy money. It's going to be easier than screenwriting. Screenwriting was tough. I was tired of going to meetings and like just like it was exhausting. And I went for the easy route, but it ended up being amazing. Sometimes taking the path of least resistance is actually good. So like it's just you just don't know, and I think that's kind of like it's what makes all of this kind of fantastic. It's just
Oh,
like you just don't know.
it's a beautiful life. It is such a
Yeah,
bizarre, wonderful, and incredible life. Like for me, I can pinpoint a few different, looking back at my own life, I can pinpoint a few key pivotal moments which point me in certain directions, which led me to certain spots. And it's a fun little activity to do where each one of them that happened was never intended. None of them were intended,
yeah,
but it happened. So a big one before most of this happened was, so my dad had his own company, or my mum and dad both worked together with their own company they've had since I was a kid. It's a graphic design and printing company.
Great.
And then, so I've never been interested in graphic design and printing, whatever it might be, blah, blah, blah. But when I was 14, 15, I don't exactly remember, there was a new company came to them, said, can you do all the graphics for us? Well, no, sorry, they already had a graphic designer. But then can you do all the printing for us and all the marketing stuff, blah, 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 all the physical marketing. And he said, yeah, no worries. And my dad, just bad chance of it, said, oh, because they were a starting company. And this was a company called Be Active. And what they did was children's sort of summer holiday activity like stuff. So parents would drop the kids off during the school holidays, and then they'd have activities, different sports throughout the whole day. And then my dad turned around to him and said, can my boys come down and see if they like it and maybe do some volunteering or have a job throughout the summer? And I was like, what, really? And he goes, yeah, but look how much they pay. I was like, okay, fair enough. He goes, yeah, but you can go out with your friends more, you can buy more clothes. I was like, yeah, okay, go on then. I went up, volunteered on the first day, fell in love with it. The whole summer, I found out I was quite good at coaching kids and doing sports games with kids. I had the confidence to do it, and by the end of that first week, I was running my own group of, say, 29-year-olds doing different activities with them. And I did that for a few years. When the time came to come travelling further down the line, I didn't think I was qualified to do so, but I just applied for a season working in childcare abroad. I was like, oh, they're not going to take me because they're not going to take me because I'm not a qualified teacher. I'm not got any real experience doing so. But lo and behold, they turned around and said, yeah, we'd love to have you. You've got loads of experience, because by that point I had 4 or 5 years of experience. And they said, yeah, come along. Great. From there, that led me to doing the winter. And that then from doing coaching with kids, I wanted to then start doing coaching with adults within sports. Trained to be a personal trainer. Came out here, did my personal training, doing that over at Virgin Active up near us. And then from there, from doing that and then having my head set on, all right, I'm just going to do personal training as a way to help me whilst I travel. I got really into it, doing the social media stuff and wanting to make it as a business for myself so I could travel and do the online personal training. Very quickly turned out that I hated doing it as a job every single day. So I was on the other side of the world and had to think, right, what could I, because I've always thought I want to do something which can kind of compound over time. But in order for that to compound over time and to put the effort and work into it, the first things first is I've got to enjoy it and I've got to love it. And I had a little sit down and think, what are the things that I enjoy? Because I love traveling. I love speaking to people, love making new friends. I listened to a lot of podcasts. I was like, all right, I'll just start a podcast. And I was like, okay, I'll just start one because it sounds fun. And then I did my first one with a guy named Adam Cleveland, who I met whilst out in Greece, who's just an absolutely mad guy, travels around a lot and does just bizarre things. And when in Greece, I distinctly remember out of nowhere, he goes, I don't know why, but I think you'd be good on a podcast. I was like, okay, is that because I've not got the face for TV? Just like completely part it off as a joke because I'm from the north of England and my accent's quite thick and stupid a lot of the time. But then I did the first one with him. I turned around to afterwards to Katie after doing the first one just to try it out, and I was like, you know what? That was so much fucking fun. That was so much fun. I got to speak with a friend or a person for 3 hours straight, which today is a rarity. When do you ever get the chance to just speak to somebody for so long and have a good, deep and funny conversation without getting drunk or without another activity or whatever it might be? And I became so much better friends with him and had a better connection with him, even though we were already good friends. And I turned around to Katie afterwards and I was like, that was fucking epic. I loved that so much. I know this is what I want to do because even if I don't make a single penny from it, I'll very happily do this multiple times per week just for the sheer fun of it. Because the luxury you get whilst you're traveling is you do get a lot of time to think about what you want to do. A hell of a lot of time. And you come to some conclusions. You also come to a lot of conclusions that you have no conclusions.
The best conclusion is no conclusion.
Yeah. And
when you have an ambiguous ending. I think leaving it in zone and zone that is last. I the phrase "a work in progress." I think I used to like that phrase, and then I think we also just used it after him slash as well. And then after that, I was like, I can't use it ever again. But
Damn
it's
it.
always a work in progress. Like you don't like if you don't find the conclusions, I think a lot of people get worried that they don't know what they want to do. Well, they just don't do. They think, I don't get make something like life. Honestly, if you don't
Yeah.
know, it is fine. Like, not doing is bad, but like knowing is bad. Like, if you just don't do anything, if you don't actually, like, what you're doing with the podcast, I think is fantastic. This is something that you enjoy, and, what you might find is you might find that you do this, and then it might start with the podcast, you love it, and then you might find that, oh, all of a sudden, you have an opportunity to go into radio, or there's something else, and you stay. You have to know. And I think the best thing you can do is just do something.
Yeah. Do something, anything. Just do it, as Nike would say.
As long as you're passionate about it as well. If you're passionate about it, just do it.
I mean, that passion will take you all over the world, round and back. I mean, we come from we are feathers of the same bird, in the fact that we grew up with that kind of little bit of a nudge, some might say, from family members to kind of go and see the world. And it wasn't we weren't forced to, but they kind of showed us that magic. And that magic allowed us to, again, have that freedom where we didn't have that pressure on us from family members or from the rest of society that we had to go down the usual path. Which for some people, it is. That path is there, and they say, do this because we've struggled, your family has struggled, you need to be secure, and that's the most important thing. And that's what their priorities were and their prerogatives, and they find their own joy from doing that. But some of us, like ourselves, were very lucky enough to have that freedom and encouragement to find our own way in life.
I think that's something to be very appreciative of. Like, was that your dad was willing to just be like, hey, I'm going to give you some money and go on the drugs of great nation Australia. Like, it's like,
He didn't give us any money to do it, bastard, after saying you would. I did turn around to him and was like, oh, we're going to go to Australia now. Can you pay for the flights? And he goes, no.
for proposals. Really. Okay. It's fantastic. You had that. No, there is. I definitely had something similar, but not like I'm going to pay for you and you're going to go to drugs or whatever. It was more just like, you want, like, like when I was like finished high school and I was like, it was just like the logical, like, first like, I wouldn't be going to I wouldn't be like, oh, I've got to worry about the studies. And like when I finished uni, I'm like, I'm going to go travel for a year. It wasn't like, oh, you should think about getting a job. I was like, nah, Dad. And it's like, as well, I was lucky enough to lose like 3 time. Yeah. And like when you're living, and that's like, because friends who have to move out for whatever reason. And then all of a sudden, all their money gets stolen up like rares. They don't have time, but they won't be able to sell because they can't save. Whereas I was lucky enough to live at home rent free. So even though it's not that tainted experience, so pretty much say, it's like this still.
Well, funnily enough, I had I had to pay rent. So if my parents' rule was from the beginning, they said this, that if you're not in formal education for your own career, you're going to pay what we call board. So you're going to pay rent. But like, this is fair enough. Like we weren't a very well off family. We weren't poor by any stretch of the imagination, but it wasn't a case of it's not free for us. It's a struggle for us at times. And if you can help out because you're working, we're not just going to let you piss it up the wall about helping out the family. It was like, yeah, that's completely respectable. So at some stage, it was like, if I leave, I haven't got to pay that, and I can actually spend it on what I want to.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. And for me, while I was living at home, I was very lucky that I wasn't at home rent free while I was at uni, which meant that I could go and do all these trips because I worked as a waiter and would be able to save a decent amount of money and go traveling, which is obviously up the best of not correct. It's for a lot of other countries. If you work as a waiter, you're not and I went to do Australia as well because like we said, hey, it's like I'll take others could make to waste $27 an hour. So like obviously if I'm not spending money on rent, which is one of the biggest expenses in Australia, rent is pretty expensive. Like I was super lucky to be able to go do that. And then when I was starting out doing the screenwriting, the only reason I could do that was because I could go a part-time job and I did it home for free, and that's like access and any money on rent, which means if I was renting, then I would have to work way more hours, and then I wouldn't have had time to write. And basically, I was lucky enough that I'm at home. I do work part-time hours, and instead of the rest of like writing, which I had times and shit. You know, just doing something creative. You need time for this shit. You don't start like some people start with right, but most people raise stick themselves. It was fucking awful, terrible. I had to work at, like that shit off really fucking hard. And then the only reason why I would do that is because I was paying for it. I was just couldn't learn it. I will. So that's, I mean, there's nothing worse, like, being upfront honest about that kind of stuff, because I feel like
Of
it's
course
just
not.
bad expectations. But there are people out there who are like, oh no, I've been so successful to the talent, blah blah blah. Like, it's how you're successful as hell because you come from a wealthy background. You didn't pay rent when you were being shit. You had the opportunity to learn and create a title, and like being given those opportunities. That's the only reason why I discuss that. There's a lot of people out there who will never have that. Slightly different. I always think that's what I mentioned.
No, for sure. And I think I have a saying which I heard a while back, which I use from all my clients at PT, and I use it for everything I kind of do myself, which is what you appreciate appreciates. So if you can appreciate and be grateful for what you've had, more of those times will more or less come your way. That's what you're kind of seeking out. And then I, for one, am just so appreciative that you did carry on that path and you loved your writing, because reading through some of your stuff on Medium, it was it. I love reading travel stories, but I love the fact that yours are. I mean, you really do kind of live by the mantra of don't tell a story without points and don't make a point without story. And I'm reading your stuff, and I just literally was laughing out loud, just like chuckling to myself. I was like, some of that little hidden references you put in as well. The one about the Pirates of the Caribbean one. I was.
Oh shit. That's true, man. That was absolutely like 100% true. Like what? I used to like Pirates of the Caribbean or every single line.
But even then, it's like, well, I'm the worst writer ever, but at least you've heard of me. I was like, ah. But I mean, I'm ever so grateful that you do the stuff you do, and you have done the stuff you do, because I know it feels often that you might be shouting to the void, even if you've got a following and you're making some money from it. It feels like you're shouting into the void. But then when you can get it in your head that the stuff that you put out there is not only good, but it actually has a tangible effect on someone else's life, then the outreach of what you put into the world can only bring positive things back and pass them on further than you'd ever know. And for that, Paul, I thank you so much.
Good. I'm very grateful that you say that. So thank you. Thank you very much for having me on this show. It's been awesome for that. Absolutely cracking that.
No, it was great. Honestly, Paul, I love you to pieces. It's been a great conversation, get a few things out, and just hear your experiences and for what that means for me, if not anybody else. And it might not be applicable to anyone else, but it's great to hear it, and I wish you the best.
Thank you.
With whatever the journey goes for yourself, whichever way it turns, the ebbs and the flows, and finding and creating that community back on the northern beaches.
Yeah, no, so thank you very much. Good ones.
No worries. Anyway, take care.
You too.